Diane, tell me about the roles that lesbians play. You know, butch, femme, all that. You ever done that?
No, I haven't.
So you play the butch role, huh?
No, I just play Diane.
Throughout film history, representations of gender have both reflected and reinforced the societal norms of the period. One archetype that often disrupts these boundaries is the masculine woman. Emerging from queer subcultures in the early 20th century and gaining visibility through lesbian communities, the butch identity has long contested heteronormative ideology. In cinema history, however, these representations have either been contained, ridiculed, or erased entirely. From the boyish persona of Calamity Jane to the masculine nature of Ripley in Alien, and the more explicitly lesbian narratives of the 1990s, this essay explores how the butch identity has evolved on screen and observes a growing space for female masculinity in mainstream narratives.
Beautiful, glamorous femininity.
In the 1950s, Hollywood enforced strict gender roles within film. In Calamity Jane, Doris Day plays the role of a frontier heroine who disrupts the conventional idea of femininity through her behaviour, costume, and performance. Her tomboy persona, marked by traditionally masculine clothing and mannerisms, can be described as a female masculinity that threatens the comfort of the heteronormative Hollywood cinema. From 1932 to 1962, Hollywood operated under the Hays Production Code, banning any clear references to homosexuality. Therefore, characters who reflected lesbian or butch identities had to be written in a way that would fit around these restrictions. Calamity Jane emerges as a visibly masculine figure, dressed in buckskins, communicating in a conventionally unladylike manner, and exhibiting a disdain for femininity. However, her narrative arc falls in the direction of heteronormativity, transforming her character into a traditional feminine woman. This resolution exemplifies how female masculinity was permitted under the condition that the character eventually fell within the typical Hollywood standard. Halberstam notes that just because explicit representation was impossible, this did not mean that queer images and themes and narratives were forced into silence. The musical number Secret Love, for instance, resonates with audiences as an illustration of butch identity, stating that female masculinity will always continue to exist, despite being erased on screen.
I had a secret love.
In Alien, Ellen Ripley is a character that stands out for challenging the norms of femininity in the late 1970s. Played by Sigourney Weaver, Ripley is a landmark figure in the shifting representation of female masculinity in film. Her character was originally written for a male lead, with the gender reassigned during the casting process. This is significant as Ripley's authority, rationality, and aggressive nature align with traditionally masculine traits, common within the science fiction genre. Her character is not defined by her romantic interests or vulnerability, but rather by her leadership, competence, and strength. Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity helps highlight Ripley's position in changing the concept of femininity on screen. Her character is performed in a way that destabilises the stereotypes of gender, issuing orders to male crew members, wearing a uniform not traditional to a female role, and displaying a theme of detachment typically shown in male protagonists. Butler states that there is no gender identity behind the expressions of gender. The identity is performatively constituted by the very expressions that are said to be its results. Ripley exemplifies this by demonstrating that traits often seen as masculine are not strictly tied to men. Although she is not explicitly written as queer, Ripley's character unsettles typical constructions of gender and opens a space for butch interpretations. If These Walls Could Talk Too represents a rare instance in mainstream cinema where butch identity is portrayed explicitly, with emotional depth and background. Chloe Sevigny's character Amy embodies an unapologetic display of female masculinity, shown through clothing, mannerisms, and dynamics. Her presence in the film disrupts both the expectations of heteronormative cinema and the norms within her own community, more specifically in scenes where her gender expression is scrutinised by her partner's friends. This reflects the marginalisation of butch identity that can also be present within queer circles. Leslie Feinberg's Stone Butch Blues provides an essential framework for understanding this experience, writing, "There were no women on television like the small woman reflected in this mirror. None on the streets." This sense of invisibility is highlighted in Amy's interactions as she navigates both desire and rejection. Instead of framing her masculinity as a rejection of womanhood, the film presents it as a grounded identity. Her refusal to conform challenges dominant ideas about what women should look like, how they should behave, and who they are allowed to be. Halberstam suggests that butch identity often falls outside familiar narrative structures that define mainstream femininity. In this film, Amy's character portrays a representation of female masculinity that is unapologetic and emotionally layered. Her presence is a turning point in the portrayal of butch women in cinema. No longer hidden, but foregrounded with complexity and compassion. From these films, we can trace a clear evolution in how female masculinity has been portrayed in film. Earlier representations were shaped by social constraint and censorship, forcing the butch identity to be softened to fit the cultural norms. But as societal attitudes began to change, so did depictions in film, moving from stereotypical interpretations to depictions of open and complex female characters. This representation is vital for education, acceptance, and visibility. As the butch identity moved from the sidelines to the focus of the narrative, it reveals how film not only reflects gender norms, but can also rewrite them.